Hi everyone, welcome back for our December live stream on Hot Topics. I have to apologise up front for being a bit creaky because I've been flat out feeling a bit under the weather for the last couple of days, but I'm hoping to get through this with my trusty cup of tea to see me through. So we've got a little bit of our Christmas decorations up, but I'm not feeling very terribly festive with this bug that I've been struggling with. So do say hello in the comments and welcome to the live stream. Let's just move things around a little bit on my desktop. So this is the third of our Hot Topics live stream, and the idea of this is that it's open to everybody, but it is available on replay afterwards. So if you don't have time to stay to the end or you want to watch it again, then you can do that afterwards. It will be up under the Lives tab from the homepage. So who have we got here so far? Yehuva, hi. Hi, David. Hi, Steve Standerson Art. Hello, Lynn. Thank you. And David says he can hear me clearly. That's good because now I'm talking, I can realise I'm a bit croaky, even though it hasn't seemed to have been on my chest. Hi, Alison. It seems to have been more about feeling exhausted and just not me for 6. I spent most of Sunday fast asleep. So I've taken my paracetamol and this is as functional I've been for about 48 hours. So if you've just joined us, do say hi in the chat so we see who's here and I can say hello to you. Thank you, David. I hope to get well soon. I'm already much better than I was. So whatever this happens to be, it's quick. So the idea was that we would do one of these every month on the third Monday and focus on just one topic each time. And just as I always do, having sorted something out, I've changed my mind. So I'm changing things up in the new year, and I've decided that I will do 2 lives a month from January that's open to everyone, in addition to our members exclusive live for super fans. So the dates are going to change a bit. The ones for everybody will be on the 2nd and the 4th Mondays each month. And we will be back for our Hot Topics on the 2nd week of January. And I'll announce a bit more about how it's going to be structured after Christmas. So look out for that in the community posts. Alison says you sound really poorly. Floppy has been surprisingly good, bless him. Gooder than I thought he would be, to be fair, because like all greyhounds, he's generally very keen on getting on with his thing, and his thing is bouncing around. But he's been surprisingly good. I took him out on Saturday afternoon, and he hasn't left the house apart from the garden since then. And he's coping very well, I have to say. They've all been very good about the lack of a walk. Luckily, the editor is here, so he's been helping out as I've been comatose, and he's been very good with looking after them for me. So let me crack on in case I run out of voice. So where are we? So we're going to change things up a bit after Christmas. I'm going to be back for Hot Topics on the 2nd Monday of the month, and there's going to be another live stream open to everybody on the 4th Monday of the month, and that's going to be on lots of bits and pieces, is my thought, rather than do it on one key topic. I'm planning to pick up various little bits and pieces. If you have anything that might class as a quick query, something you've always wondered about, but not a big thing, then those would be ideal for that second live. So you could always put those in the comments for me or pop them on a post when I share it on YouTube. And I'll choose a few of them to talk about each time. And this first hot topic session will stick with one subject in a bit more depth. And then the members session for the Superfan members is going to be on a subject in more depth that they have chosen for me to talk about. So it's much more guided by them rather than me. Before we get started on this month's hot topic, I'd like to give a shout out to our new members this month. In particular, I'd like to mention Denise Carter and Lynn Stevens, hi both, who have upgraded to the Superfan membership. Now it's very easy to sign up, and if you change your mind at any time, you can adjust the membership. So the only commitment you have to make is just for 1 month, to be honest. There are 3 levels of membership to choose from, and we appreciate you joining at any level. It starts off with the basic supporters level and goes up through helping hand to super fans, and it's the super fans that get the most perks. If you would like to show your appreciation for our videos in other ways rather than a monthly membership, then YouTube offers super various bits and pieces. So they have a super thanks option where you can send a donation as a one-off contribution. And if you want to support us through our videos with this live, next to the chat bar, there is a $sign, and you can show your support there with super chat and super something else. I can't remember what it is. My poor brain is full of joy, full of bugs. But anyway, if you feel like showing your appreciation there, super stickers, that's the other thing. Super stickers and super chat in the live, and super thanks is available on any video. So you can click on the $sign button alongside any video. And that will help us all making content here on YouTube, because let's face it, if there's no food around, then they don't want to play. So I also need to give a big shout out for the 2 lovely people who send us treats this month. So we have had a bag of gravy bones from Lynn Stevens, which, to be fair, did not last very long because they get through a lot of gravy bones. Gravy bones are always welcome. And we also had some more treats from superfan Alison Matthews, who's one of our new members, as I mentioned. And the guys have asked me to pass along their thanks for their kindness this month. And we've got a short coming up where you can see the guys enjoying their snacks. So look out for those. Let's check what's happening in the chat. So David says, do all the dogs have stockings? You'll have to wait till Friday to find out about that. That is the subject of this Friday short video. So have a look at that on Friday. Hi, Mr. Piggy and Miss Piggy. Alison says she'd love to send a donation. That's really kind, Alison. You can donate through Super Thanks alongside any video or with the options here on this live. I wondered about setting up a wish list on Amazon. Do you think that would be of interest? I was thinking of setting up a wish list of things that they would like to try, and then what we could do is what we've done with the lovely treats that Alison has sent. We've made a short featuring the dogs having those treats. And so if you would like to send us some treats for the guys from a wish list, then we could make a little short of them enjoying those treats. So you get to see what they've been up to and what they thought of them. Courtesy of the editor, of course. None of that is anything to do with me. That's all the editor's work. They talk to him and tell him what to say. So, yes, for the wish list. I will sort out a wish list. I won't put a great many things on it to start with, but I'll ask them all for 1 item each for their wish list and set that up and see what they think. Cheeky monkeys they are. To be fair, anything works, as you'll see from one of the videos. The editor has been very busy making shorts over the last couple of days while I've been in bed. One of the advantages of me being here feeling poorly is that I'm downstairs on the sofa snoozing, and it means he can go upstairs and do silly voices for the shorts. So he's been working hard on that. So we've got a whole load of shorts lined up for you right through into February now. We've got that under control. So I just have a quick swig of my tea. And we'll move on to this month's topic, which is coping with Christmas. So not long now till Christmas, is it? I've kind of lost track of when it is. Next Monday. So not long to go. You're probably right in the middle of all your preparations because you've probably been much more organised than me. And Christmas means, yes, Gandalf, it does. He's just woken up at the thought of that. I didn't say Christmas treats, I just said Christmas. Oh, so it's boring. So Christmas means change. And you might have already been going shopping more, buying presents, wrapping presents up, putting up trees. You might have rearranged the furniture. You might have decorated the house. Perhaps you've been going out more or having guests round. Perhaps you've taken time off work, or you've been working longer hours for some people. So a lot of things happen at Christmas that is different. Whether you celebrate Christmas or not as Christmas, we do tend to do things differently at this time of the year. And for some dogs, and some greyhounds included, change can be fun, it can be interesting, it can be entertaining. But for others, it's really quite upsetting because they're so used to their routine that they would rather it stayed that way. And if it's their first year in a home, they may not yet have got the hang of things changing. You know, if the furniture's always been this layout since they arrived, they may not really quite get the idea that it gets different. So it might be exciting, it could be stressful, and your dog can pick up on how you feel about Christmas as well. So you might see some changes in their behavior that relates to the preparations for Christmas. And that might be based on how you feel as well as what's going on. And if your dog is the anxious type or the noise sensitive type, it does pay to plan ahead to see how you could support them more carefully. You might want to start them on a calming supplement or create a safe space that's quiet and extra cozy for them to retreat to when they've had enough of the socializing or they just want to stay out of the way. So the first thing I want to talk about is food. I don't know why I'm obsessed with food. Festive food. There may be more food and also non-food items in the house around Christmas that they can get access to if they are that way inclined. And some of these can pose a risk if you're not careful about preventing access. And it's also a really bad time to have a medical emergency because with many vets closed for the holidays, you're going to have more days that mean they're out of hours than you would have done at any other time of the year, because between Christmas and New Year, especially with them not falling at a weekend, you've got several days on the trot over 2 weekends, which are going to be out of hours. So it's going to be quite an expensive thing if you do end up having a veterinary emergency. And depending on your emergency vet, you could end up having to travel quite a bit further and go to a vet that you're not familiar with, that you don't know where it is, which can add complications when it's already a difficult time. So let's look at some of the main risks that can be posed by food and what you want to keep out of their way. You might find some of these are quite things you're expecting, but there's also, you don't always think of it because it is in a different location or a different way. So chocolate is the first one. Even if it's wrapped, dogs can still sniff them out. And I've already been seeing I've already been seeing posts on YouTube saying, help, my dog has eaten a box of Quality Street. They left the wrappers, but they've eaten the rest. Do I have to go to the vet? Well, maybe not for Quality Street because there's so many toffees in there. I never buy them because they have so many toffees in. But chocolate is poisonous to dogs, is the bottom line. It contains the stimulant theobromine, which causes seizures and heart rhythm abnormalities. So you might be careful to keep your sealed box of chocolates away, but what about a little dish of chocolates put out on the coffee table? What about chocolate tree decorations? What about the people who were visiting and you hand a box of chocolates round and it gets put down somewhere at the end and you don't realise it's there? So there are plenty of ways that chocolate can be a risk, even if you would normally be fairly careful. You also want to take care with things like chocolate cake, so chocolate Christmas logs, or drinking chocolate, being careful where these things are left and whether the dog has access. When it comes to chocolate, it's the amount of cocoa in it that's important. So dark chocolate is worse than milk chocolate. And if you can keep hold of the packet to get details of the ingredients, that is going to help your vet, because they will work out how much actual cocoa that your dog has had, and then they know if it needs to have its stomach pumped or not. So with chocolate, it really does depend on the quantity. Dried fruit, my favourite. So many things at Christmas have dried fruit in. So you've got mince pies, you've got Christmas cake, you've got Christmas pudding. Even Stollen has Christmassy things in, such as this dried fruit. So raisins and sultanas can be deadly if eaten by dogs. They cause kidney injury, which can lead to kidney failure if the dog isn't seen by your vet promptly. So if you think your dog has eaten some mince pies, then it pays to contact your vet. And it may be that your vet has a free helpline that you can contact to find out if you need to go or not. And I have also found that I can get away with ringing my emergency vet and get some advice about whether we need to go or not. So it's often worth giving them a call, even if you don't end up going in. Again, these are things that might be left out on plates, or you might be preparing things for a Christmas buffet and leave them out on the counter, and then, of course, the dog leaps up and snaffles some. They do know when things are up there. Just today, Gandalf was busy scraping away at my kitchen cupboards because the licky mats were on the windowsill, and he thought he should get access to them quicker than it was going to take me to walk in the kitchen and get them. So any sort of tasty things on the counter can make a temptation for your dog to jump up and get them. Nuts. Nuts are another one that can be risky. Strictly speaking, it's macadamia nuts that present a specific risk, and the association there is with vomiting and weakness. And we know some nuts are okay. I mean, dogs have peanut butter, so it's not a case of all nuts, but they can cause a choking hazard. So if they ate things still in their shell or large nuts, then that can be a risk of a blockage or a choking hazard, even if they're not actually toxic. So be careful if you tend to have a dish of nuts in their shells out for people to snack on. Thinking about bones, I'm sure you're normally very careful about this, but this is probably the one time where an awful lot of people will have some form of poultry for the Christmas dinner. So it might be chicken or turkey or duck or goose, but bones left over from meat, poultry or fish present a danger to threats if they are cooked, because cooked bones are brittle and can therefore splinter when chewed, and poultry bones are particularly risky in this respect. So you want to make sure that your cooked dinner isn't in reach of any counter-surfing dogs, but also the carcass can't be scavenged from the fridge or from the bin, because they could easily be tempted to help themselves to something else later whilst you're all busy playing games in the other room or watching the Queen's speech on the television. What else have we got? Onions. This is one we might not think of so much. You might not have actively set out to cook onions for your Christmas dinner, but there's a good chance there are some onions in there. So onions and onion-containing products such as gravy and stuffing can cause an upset tummy. So this might not be life-threatening, but you don't really want to have to spend Boxing Day at the vet's or cleaning up from the after effects of the dog having eaten gravy that's got onions in. If they're eaten to any great extent, it can lead to red blood cell damage and anemia. So they can have a serious effect. And it applies to anything in that family. So leeks, garlic, spring onions, they can all have the same effect. So if your dog is tempted with stealing stuff with these in, then be careful. And also, if you fancy doing a little Christmas dinner for your dog, it would be safer to make them their own gravy using meat stock instead of the stock that's got onions in, and maybe don't give them any stuffing if the stuffing has onions in. The other one that I wanted to bring up was alcohol and caffeine. So dogs don't process these stimulants in the same way that we do. We want to take care that they don't get a chance to drink from cups and glasses left around on low tables. Yes, now stop it. Excuse me, Gandalf's being awkward there. I might have to go and cover him up with a towel in a minute. So, alcohol and caffeine. Dogs don't process these stimulants in the same way that we do. So we don't want them to have a sneaky drink of your alcohol while it's sitting on a low table. And we don't want any visitors to think it would be funny to give them a sip from their drink. So this can be quite dangerous, both with alcohol and caffeine. So do be careful to keep those out of the way of your dog. I just have to go and cover Gandalf with a towel. Yes. Sorry about that. It's got quite a nasty looking skin tag on his leg and he keeps licking it, which of course I would rather he didn't do. He's making a real mess of it, to be honest. So we're doing our best to stop him licking, but he knows when I'm busy and I can't so easily stop him from licking. Let's take a look at the comments before I move on to more Christmassy things that can cause a problem. So we've got a couple of people saying they like the shorts. Thank you very much. Gandalf likes making the shorts and Floppy likes to make the shorts as well. AJ doesn't always feature in these things because he's very shy and retiring, bless him. He's usually in bed along with Meggie. Alison says, I bet Floppy enjoys peering up the Christmas tree. Yes, we're coming on to that next. Hi, Denise. And Alison's friend's greyhounds ended up at the vet's last year eating her mince pies. Oh dear, that's not good news. And really not the way you want to spend Christmas, is it? So it does pay to be super careful. Andy Hoover says, I once accidentally sprayed the anti-tick spray. Oh my goodness, into the mouth. The anti-tick spray into the mouth of her dog, thinking it was the tooth spray. The call to the poison hotline was interesting. Oh my goodness. Do tell us what the outcome was. Because any of those, excuse me, I don't want to fade away before the end of this. Any of those anti-ticks, anti-flea treatments are basically insecticides. So they are effectively a poison. So that could be quite nasty. Hopefully it wasn't too much. And you survived. And Mr. Piggy reminds me that it's the King's speech this time. Yeah, I still haven't got the hang of this. It's been the Queen's speech ever since I was tiny, and I can't remember. It somehow hasn't quite sunk in, I have to say. Not that I watch it anyway. And Lynn says, what will charcoal help with? Just things the charcoal can attach to. Nadiator, Yankee Candle. I rang the vet who said charcoal wouldn't help. She was fine. The candle wasn't poisonous. With something like a candle, I think your problem would be if it had something in it that could be toxic. So if it had essential oils in and they were toxic, like tea tree, then that would be the risk rather than the candle itself. If you have a good quality candle, then it could be beeswax, but a lot of them are petroleum wax. So they're not going to be toxic as such. They might just not go down too well. I have to say, Meggie ate nearly a whole bag of tea lights, except for the tinfoil. And she did okay on that. They just kind of pooped out the next day. But I did have these awful naughty thoughts about seeing whether I could light her poo to make poo candles in the garden. Enough of that. Yeah, charcoal, when charcoal is activated, then toxins or anything can adhere to the charcoal. So it wouldn't work with something like a whole raisin or an actual object. It's more about individual molecules. So it could help with maybe the tick spray, perhaps, because the molecules would attach. The way it helps with if they have bad wind is that the gases produced by the bacteria in the gut are absorbed, I believe it is, not absorbed, absorbed onto the surface of the charcoal. So it's more going to be of benefit for something that is molecules, a liquid, something like that. It's not going to be helping with solid things. So it could help perhaps with caffeine, because that's a molecule, or theobromine, because that's a molecule. I will have to look that one up and read up a bit more, but it's not going to help with anything that is kind of solid lumps of something. The Slow Ranger says, good evening, good evening. Alison says hello to Gandalf. Yeah, Gandalf's a pain. He's gone back to sleep again. I hope he stays that way. And you hope, right, the update on the tick spray. The poison hotline lady laughed and said it was ridiculous and it was okay as it was a herbal one. Well, I think you still need to question what was in it, because some herbal things can be quite dangerous. And I know that certain levels of, even quite low levels of tea tree oil massaged onto the skin can be dangerous for dogs. And I do know someone whose dog became very poorly after being massaged with a tea tree oil cream. And if you're spraying it onto the mucous membranes in the mouth, it's going to be very easily absorbed. So just by being herbal doesn't necessarily make it safe. And Lynn had to call the poison hotline as she kissed someone else's dog who had flea treatment on and didn't know. Yeah, you'd be safe from catching fleas yourself after that, wouldn't you? Alison says, is it true the poinsettias are poisonous? Yes, it is. I've got a list of poisonous plants coming up. The Slow Ranger says, my Greyhound has only stolen one thing, a 14-inch spicy meat pizza with extra chili. You must have been very disappointed at the loss of your pizza. But he's never pinched anything again. Yeah, that could have been quite a powerful learning experience. I remember as a child, we had a Westie and he loved to come and drink from your cup of tea. And he was a regular. If you put your mug down, he'd be there trying to drink some from your cup of tea. And one day he drank from a mug that had coffee in it, not tea, pulled a face, spat it out, and never drank from a mug after that. So that could have been quite a learning experience for your poor Greyhound. And a bit sad for you with not having any dinner with your spicy meat pizza going missing. Yogurt and bread. Yes, yogurt will be good for calming his tummy. That's where charcoal could be useful, because it's good for calming tummies down as well as absorbing all the things that might have led to explosive fartiness after the 14-inch spicy meat pizza. And Slave Ranger then says he was wishing the grass had been kept in the freezer the next day. Oh, bless him. Okay. Yes, it's always worth keeping some charcoal tablets around. You never know when they might come in useful. Excuse me. So let's move on then. My next section is about the Christmas tree. And Alison asked, what did you say? I bet Floppy would pee up the Christmas tree. Yes, I'm sure he would pee up the Christmas tree. He blotted his copybook at the weekend because he got into the front room, and I thought, oh, we'll take a chance. And I went to video Gandalf in the kitchen and came back and I thought, uh-oh. And he'd peed all over Jim's bed. So Jim has got a freshly washed bed now because Floppy peed all over it. So back to square one there. So we don't actually have a Christmas tree that stands on the floor. I have this very lovely teeny tiny Christmas tree behind me. That's about as much as we can cope with. But real Christmas trees, including pine or fir or spruce, are not particularly toxic to dogs as a tree, but the oils they produce and the pine needles that drop from the tree can be risky. So those sharp needles do get really quite fierce when they're dry. If the needles drop and then dry out, they're really quite sharp. And so they could get stuck in their paws. When they're fresher, they could cause an irritation to their skin, especially if you have one like Gandalf here, who has a bold tummy and they lay on them. And if they eat them in quantity, it could cause a mild stomach upset or a blockage. And it's not just the tree itself. We have to think about what we put on the tree, such as baubles or ribbons or tinsels. They could also cause a blockage if they're swallowed, especially something like tinsel where, it's not just one little bit, is it? It's a great long piece of it. So if you are going to have a tree and decorate it, then try to put the decorations high up or make the tree higher up in the first place, or perhaps have some sort of fencing around it in order to prevent access. As we already mentioned, you want to avoid chocolate decorations if you can, and also avoid easily breakable ornaments because you've got the risk of them chewing on plastic ornaments, but if you have glass ones and they break, they could cut themselves on that fine glass the ornaments are normally made of. Or if they knock the tree, they might knock them off and they could break. The other risk is in leaving things under the tree because they just look like a whole pile of things for unwrapping and they don't realise they're supposed to wait till Christmas to do that, especially if the gift is edible. My guys were very excited earlier on because a friend dropped some gifts round for them and they can see these packages sitting there and they would love to unwrap them now. So they had to be hidden away. And the wrapping paper can be fun to shred, but of course we don't want them to eat it. So be careful about them getting a blockage. The wires on fairy lights can be tempting as well. Now, I've come across a few dogs who have a real interest in cables with electricity running through them. So there is the risk that something attracts them to the wires on fairy lights as well as cables for anything else. So keep the cables out of reach and do switch them off when they're not in use. It seems to be something about the cable having electricity running through it that appeals, because the dogs I've encountered who've done this have always been interested in them when they are on as opposed to off. So what we got here? Merry Christmas, see you in January. So where are we? We talked about Christmas lights and the risk of them being tempted to chew the cables or the lights themselves. There's also the risk of them getting tangled up in them, which could cause them to panic and hurt themselves. And of course, if they swallow them, that's going to be pretty dangerous as well. Edible decorations are always going to be of interest to pets, and placing them out of their eye line won't stop them from investigating further. So having things that are edible on the tree is probably not going to be wise, even if you put them higher up, because they could just knock the tree over to get to them. And back to that lovely question of, will the dog pee up the tree? Well, I think it is quite tempting. Just because it's something new, it smells of the outdoors. It's a tree after all, isn't it? And who knows what little furry things have been scurrying on or around that tree before it came into your house as a Christmas tree. So do fence it off if you think the dog is tempted to pee up it. It is more common with male dogs than females. I haven't heard of a female dog trying to pee up a tree, but I would anticipate there could be at least one attempt at christening the tree if it's a real one. Perhaps less so if it's not a real one. And other plants that are poisonous. So we mentioned poinsettia, but also holly, mistletoe, and ivy are all poisonous to dogs. You don't want them munching on those. And one other that you might have more of at Christmas is potpourri. Not strictly a plant. A lot of it isn't plants, but it is things that have been infused with oils typically. And that can be quite dangerous for dogs to eat. So if you're tempted to leave a dish of that out on the table, then keep that out of the way. So, any thoughts on Christmas trees? Has anyone had their Christmas tree peed up already? David says that's not a mug of tea, Dill. That's a bucket of... Yeah, well, this is just a very big mug. I just have to, get more in my tea mug. That makes the tea bag go further. So anyone want to comment on Christmas trees? The Slow Ranger says, my hound is broken. He doesn't care about the tree or decorations. To be honest, if it interferes with his 20-hour sleep schedule, it's not worth interfering. Yes, perfect. Mine would be a bit that way, but in the 4 hours of madness, then they would be very keen to investigate the tree. Mr. Piggy has just tripped over their Christmas tree. I bet the guys enjoyed you doing that. And Alison asked if I have Lucozade in my bucket mug. Sadly, no, I don't have Lucozade. I have Red Bush tea because it seems to go down a bit better. Denise isn't risking a Christmas tree. I think that can be very wise. Or have a nice teeny tiny one like mine that sits on the table. I have got another one in the Christmas that in the kitchen that I will put a few lights on, but that sits on the windowsill. I don't have anything at dog level. I've got last year's Christmas tree sitting in a pot down by the shed in the garden, and I've been thinking for a few months now that it's not doing very well and I'm going to have to give in and throw it away. And I discovered why this morning, because I went down the garden with the dogs and caught Floppy peeing very, very accurately into its pot. Not a single bit, not a single drip managed to miss the pot. So I now know why that tree is dying off, and that will soon be going in the compost heap. Denise says, are crisps and savouries safe for greys? By and large, there's no reason why they shouldn't have crisps and savoury things, providing they don't contain anything that is going to be toxic to them. But they do generally have a lot of salt, and dogs don't really need any added salt. They don't actually detect salt in the way that we do. So they don't get, oh, that's yummy, that's salty, I'd like some more. They just like eating them. And they could easily end up with an awful lot of salt. So I would be careful about how much they ate because of the salt content more than because of the rest of the ingredients in them. Floppy has some skill, says the Sloan Ranger. Yeah, he's very precise. He manages to pee very high up. I've always had my plants usually on raised blocks or on a second plant pot because he's so good at channeling it. I've had to raise everything a little bit high. He cocks his leg surprisingly high for a greyhound. Most of my boys can't be bothered with that. But he likes to cock his leg high, and he's peed into a few things that I've had to raise higher now. Lynn says, I'm very surprised that mine aren't bothered with the tree when they go up through the lounge to bed. The problem is when I'm leading them up and they have happy tail. Yeah, happy tail is bad news for Christmas trees. You need a Christmas tree and Christmas tree decorations that bounce, I think, with a happy tail. Oh dear. Yeah, my little one on the table is so much easier. Let's think about my last section I wanted to talk about. Oh no, 2 more sections. I better crack on. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was Christmas presents. Some things about Christmas gifts that are worth bearing in mind. So dogs do love new toys, and they don't recognise things that are not meant for them, as I'm sure you encountered in the past. So if you have children visiting at Christmas and they're going to be opening presents, you need to think about all the precautions you would typically need to consider for children around dogs and toys. But remember, small parts can be swallowed and lead to blockages. That is the dogs, I'm thinking, not the children. And larger toys may be chewed up and cause the same problem, as well as hurting their mouths. Keep an eye on where children leave their toys and monitor your pet, because if the dog gets hold of it later, you'll probably have some very upset children and you might get a dog that needs to go to the vet. A lot of toys these days need batteries. So another thing to bear in mind is that batteries are a risk, and most small batteries are the perfect size to be swallowed. So if they're chewed and swallowed, you can have multiple problems. They could cause an obstruction, they could cause chemical burns, or they could cause poisoning from the heavy metals. So swallowing a battery is definitely time to go to the vet. Even those little teeny tiny coin-shaped disc batteries can be a risk because they can damage the esophagus on the way down. And then, of course, you have the problems once they're inside. So be careful if anyone is having any gifts for Christmas that have batteries in. One of the things that I particularly wanted to talk about when it comes to dogs is rawhide. I've been horrified at how much rawhide there is in the shops. So you go to some of the big pet shops, they just have racks and racks and racks of some enormous treats made out of rawhide, brightly coloured, massive quantities of rawhide. And they might look attractive and they might look festive, but you could be tempted thinking it would be a great way to keep your dog quiet while you enjoy your Christmas lunch, but they can be really very dangerous for your dog. And depending on the source of the rawhide, the actual hide itself can contain toxins from the processing that it's gone through. The bright colours are then created using additives, which are unlikely to be healthy for the dog. And when the dogs chew on the rawhide, it becomes a slimy, gooey mess, and they can end up swallowing quite large pieces. So there's a risk of choking if it's successfully swallowed, a risk of causing blockages in their intestine, which can require emergency surgery. So I would say vote with your feet and do not buy rawhide. If anyone gives you rawhide for the dogs, throw it in the bin, because it really is not safe for anybody's dog. I think in the past, people thought it was perhaps helpful for their teeth as well, because they would chew on it for ages. But once it goes soft and squishy, it's not going to clean any teeth. To clean tartar off teeth, you need something hard, like a bone. Squidgy, gooey rawhide is not going to clean anything off their teeth. And it might keep them quiet for a while, but there are much healthier things you can give them to keep them quiet. So please, please don't feed your dogs rawhide. So what have we got in the comments? Oh, Steve Sanderson has very, very kindly sent us a donation. Thank you very much, Steve. He says, Merry Christmas and thanks for all the videos. You're very, very welcome. We'll be back right throughout the next year and beyond, we hope, with more for you. So thank you so much for that. That's really kind of you, Steve. Mr. Piggy says, a real Christmas squirrel. Yes, he would like that. Floppy would love that. He's got right into the habit of charging down the garden whenever I open the door and just circling at the bottom of the garden, barking. And it is anticipation that there may be a squirrel, or just going and barking in case there is a squirrel somewhere in the vicinity that needs barking at. Half the time there is nothing there, but yeah, he has to do it anyway. So that is our latest thing to work on. The Slow Ranger says, I wish rawhide was banned off. Yes, I totally agree. If you're lucky, it could be made in this country, but an awful lot of it comes from China, and the processing to create the rawhide is really quite toxic and full of nasty chemicals. I'm thinking I'm going to do a video on this come the new year. I was reading up on it a little bit, and it really is quite gruesome. And I think people see it as maybe a fairly natural thing to give the dog, but it really isn't natural. It's not something you're going to see in the natural section of a dog food store. It really is pretty grim stuff. And Alison's previous dog got it stuck in her throat. Oh, it's so scary when they get it stuck. I hope they survived that incident. Mr. Piggy says, also the bins on a walk after Christmas get the cats in them and chicken and turkey bones are all over the place. Yes, that's a very good point. I've had trouble with that as well. Or people have been out on the lead up to Christmas and they've had takeaways that involve things on the bone, and you get those bones littered around as well. It's you do need to be very, very careful with bones, just because if they splinter and break, then you risk them piercing their gut. So very, very dangerous. And David said, good boy Floppy, keep those critters at bay. He's doing his best. I'm trying to persuade him he doesn't need to do as much, but it's a slow process. So any other thoughts on Christmas presents that you'd like to share? Tell me now, because I've got one more section for you. One more section, a little section, just a little section. The Sloan Ranger says, my local pet shop sells lots of natural goodies. Oh, all the gross things. They're just so grim, aren't they? I can't bear the ones with fur on. The ones that are identifiable, I struggle with. Deer's legs, rabbit's ears, dried udders, etc. So tell me, what is your least favourite or most gruesome dried food treat? I think for me, it's the pig snouts that have been fried or baked so they puff up. I just think they're just totally horrible. So pop in the comments if you have a least favourite or most gruesome dried food treat, or if you think they're great and it doesn't bother you at all. Steve says, hen's feet and rabbit's ears, are they the ones you don't like or the ones you do like, Steve? I think that the feet are a bit grim, actually. I'm always very wary with feet. Yeah, don't like. So Steve doesn't like the hen's feet and the rabbit's ears. I think the rabbit's ears are a bit weird because you kind of, you know, having grown up with rabbits, you stroke their lovely ears and they're so soft and fluffy, and then, oh, look, here's an ear for the dog to eat. The feet I find rather worrying, actually, because I've found that sometimes they've tried to eat them too quickly and have choked on them. So I know a lot of people do feed those dried feet perfectly successfully, but I'm always a bit wary of feet. I worry about them getting stuck. And the Sloan Ranger says that The stuffed esophagus is the treat that turns my stomach more because of the smell than the appearance. I wonder if that's to do with what it's been stuffed with. Interesting. And Steve says his favourite is dried tripe. Yes, I get through a lot of tripe. In fact, I buy tripe in 4-kilo boxes because we get through a lot. It smells grim, but not as bad as fresh tripe. But they love it. It disagrees with Floppy's bottom. We have to wear a gas mask afterwards, but they do love it. And it is really quite crunchy and tasty as far as they're concerned. That's the one I use most. I don't tend to use any of the piggy stuff, mainly because some of them have had upset tummies. I think the piggy things are a bit too fatty, and I wouldn't be able to buy things like the deer's legs with the fur and the hooves on. Lynn says, doesn't bother me. Those trite sticks you recommended are great, but do smell. I know some people who I know can't look at sprats. Yeah, I'm quite happy with sprats. Sprats don't bother me, but I know someone who couldn't bear sprats at all. She couldn't even look at them. I found really weird. But I couldn't give my dog one of those deer's legs with the hooves and the fur. I find that a bit gross. That's somehow even worse than hooves. But I remember when I was a child and we had horses, when the farrier had been, then the local, the dogs that lived at the stables would often come up and take away the bits of the hoof trimmings to chew on. So they were creating their own, weren't they? So let's just do this last very little section that I have here on having visitors. So having a house full of visitors can be a bit overwhelming for some greyhounds, if for no other reason than it stops them getting their usual long daily nap. And sleep is really important. If they don't get enough sleep, they're going to get fractious, just like children do. And that can lead to less than typical behaviours. So if your dog has particular needs, such as being left alone when they're snoozing, you might want to brief your visitors in advance. You could even create a sweet little sheet with a do's and don'ts list on it as part of an invitation to hand out to them to explain what to do and not to do with the dogs. Some would be happier if you ignored them and be allowed to check the guests out in their own time. Others would rather be all over the guests, and some guests might not enjoy that. So being greeted by a flurry of excited visitors can be a bit overwhelming for the dogs and also for the visitors in some cases. If they're going to be there for any length of time, you really might want to think about how you're going to manage a greyhound over this time. And if you have children visiting and it's not part of their normal experience, be sure to create a space where they can go and have some peace and quiet, because children always need supervising around dogs, especially at such an exciting time as Christmas. And you've got all that fun of new presents to open and play with, in addition of having to try and look after everyone all at once. It's very easy for someone who isn't familiar with dogs to perhaps do something your greyhound doesn't like. So a little bit of preparation in that sense as well. That was all I wanted to say about visitors. And I've noticed Lynn has said that, why are the dogs always most smelly when you have company? And the Sloan Ranger then says, I think it's all the excitement. Yes, it probably is the excitement and causing them to be a little bit agitated, or stressed is perhaps too strong a word, but it's enough that something has upset them. So just enough to upset their tummy. And I can relate to this, because if I get stressed, I get an upset tummy. And it is quite well recognised that stress changes the digestion. And I found it can be really quite noticeable. If you think back to when dogs first arrive in their homes from the kennels, when you first adopt them, it's not uncommon for them to have an upset tummy. And that isn't necessarily because of the nature of the kibble you're feeding them. It could as well be that they're stressed. So stress means that you don't process your food properly, because if you are stressed, I'm getting a bit technical here for Christmas, but hey, if you're stressed, then your body goes into fight and flight mode, which means that you are not sending your energy into what I think of as rest and recreation and digestion or housekeeping, but instead your energy is directed towards coping with the threat. And that means that when you feel challenged in any way, you do not digest things as well as you would if you were calm and relaxed. And that then means that they get gassy. So that would be when the charcoal tablets could be useful, to pop them a couple of charcoal tablets in their dinner just before that you're having visitors. That is when they could be very useful. Or if you're expecting it to be bad, then you might even start some probiotics a few days before to try and put them in the best position before you have those visitors round. So that's something that could be helpful to support them over that time. And Mr. Piggy says, Mr. Piggy says he does a do's and don'ts list for family, but they still visit. Yeah, that is a do not come and don't do come. I'd love to see your list, Mr. Piggy. I think an awful lot of people would find my doggy household a bit too overwhelming to want to visit. You have to be a brave person to even get in the back door, because I have to admit that I tend to let the dogs decide if people are coming in or not. And if you can't cope with the dogs, you don't come in. It's quite simple. And Mr. Piggy says yes. Nice and peaceful Christmas then, Mr. Piggy. So any other thoughts on Christmas or thoughts in general? Anyone else want to share their favourite or least favourite dried food? Anyone like the puffed pig's noses? Is it just me that thinks they're a bit gross? They remind me a little bit of outer spaces, but with indentations in the middle where the nostrils were. All a bit yucky, really. But ultimately healthier, and it's using all of the different parts of the animal that might otherwise go to waste or end up in your meat pie back in the day, where they could get away with putting lots of mechanically recovered meat in it. Hey. So any last questions, pop them in the chat. And if you've enjoyed this month's live stream and would like to support the channel, you can use the super buttons to make a donation, to make a one-off contribution, or if you would like to get more of the same each month, please consider becoming a channel member, and I will put the link in the description to find out more to join. We'll be back again next month for the first time in 2024 on Monday, the 8th of January. So keep an eye out on the community post for more information about that, and also information about how I'm going to be doing the live streams in January and going forward. And we've had another lovely contribution from Robert D. He says, Merry Christmas, Jill. A small thank you from Italy. You've helped us immensely, having adopted our Spanish galgo. Oh, how lovely, a galgo. That's really lovely. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Thank you, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap up now because I've nearly run out of tea and I won't cope without any tea. So I wish you all a very wonderful Christmas. We're not going to be having any more full-size videos till the end of the year, if I got that right. I think New Year's Day is the next one, but I've scheduled for you a short this Friday, a short for Christmas Day, and a short for the last Friday in December. And I will try and be in the chat as much as I can, answering your comments. So I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and I will see you in the new year. Bye, everyone. I'll close it in a minute when I manage to move this window. Yes, I'm still here. I'm trying to go. Well, I can't do it. Yes. There we are. Just talk amongst yourselves.